So, morning everyone, I am Ben. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Summit. We are an AI native investment bank for entrepreneurs. So we invest into them and we also help them to raise capital, and we purely focused on the private markets. So today I've got an epic panel of investors. Some of them focus on gaming, others are more generalist. So I'm going to pass over to all my panelists to do a quick 1-minute overview on your background and what you guys are focused on, and then we'll dive into a couple of questions. Tiago, do you want to start us off?
Hello? All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Tiago. I'm a venture partner for Griffin Gaming Partners, which is the world's largest VC specializing only in gaming with early stage equity investment, as well as now recently a project financing fund. I'm also an advisory board member at Acclaim, which is one of the most iconic publishers of the early and late 90s, with titles such as Mortal Kombat, NBA Jam, Turok, which was revived last year by a group of industry veterans. And I am launching a new vehicle focused on music copyrights in video game soundtracks. So that is my full exposure to gaming.
Awesome, love it. Luana, do you want to go for it?
Hi everyone, I'm Luana. I'm the investment associate at Supernode Global. We're an early stage consumer tech fund, and we cover everything from things like health and wellness, ed tech, consumer fintech, all the way to entertainment, social, creative industries. So not gaming specific, but we've done a couple of gaming investments, and our first fund was focused on media and entertainment, so had a stronger gaming foothold. By background, I was an operator first, founder, and now more recently an investor.
Hi everyone, my name is Gbite and I'm the managing partner of ODBA. We're an early stage venture capital firm, and we invest in consumer technology, emerging market infrastructure, and fintech. A lot of the conversations I'll be having today would be thinking of entertainment from a distribution point of view rather than content, and really excited to be here to share with you.
Hi everyone, my name is Ahmet, Cüneyt, Selçuk. Today I've been working for Invest in Türkiye, the investment promotion agency of Türkiye. As you know, Türkiye is a little bit successful in the gaming sector, and I've been responsible for venture capital and VC investments, and gaming is also one of the verticals where I'm involved in. Thank you very much.
That's great. So before the panel, I was doing a little bit of research on gaming, and we've looked at investing into a few gaming or consumer tech startups, and I had no idea before looking at those deals how big the market actually was and how relevant it is. So if we think about it today, we're in this attention economy. Your attention is so much more valuable than anything else. So how much time do we spend on our phones? A huge amount of time every day. And a huge amount of that time is actually spent gaming. So for context, from a data point of view, there was over $200 billion spent in the gaming industry, and that's more than double music and box office, which is pretty mad. So Tiago, obviously a lot's changing in this industry. It's a massive industry. AI has come about as well. We've actually recently looked at a company which is AI-generated gaming from the individual user. So the game is creating their own game that they can then go and play. Curious to know, how has the gaming space changed? We've got studios and publishers and various players within the gaming ecosystem. How has AI really affected that, and what are you seeing as being a core change in this whole ecosystem?
Okay, so that's a very big question, and I'll use it to give a bit of an overview of what's been happening in the last 4 years or so. So yes, gaming is big. That shouldn't be news to anyone, but that was, when I was in the music industry, that was one of my favorite slides to use, that gaming was bigger than music, film, and TV combined. That really put the music people in their place, basically.
Sorry, any music people?
Me, basically. But there has been a significant shift in what's the structure and the dynamics from a consumer perspective as well as from a supply perspective in the gaming industry in the last few years. So naturally, gaming became very massive from a KPIs and metrics perspective during COVID, because naturally a lot of people were at home, and between the media forms that they chose, gaming was one of the preferred ones because it was interactive, therefore more engaging than perhaps film, TV, and others. So consumption shot up through the roof. That meant that all of a sudden, these gaming companies started riding very high on their successes, and investors started looking at them as probably magical beings that had fantastic valuations that perhaps were not going to be sustainable. So they invested at a very high level of valuations, and then when COVID stopped and the lockdowns ended and people started to prefer more physical experiences, more lived experiences, metrics went down. The sustainability of those valuations was put into question. Mix that with the fact that at the same time, AI was starting to rise, and there was a fear of how that would impact the development cycles, particularly from a cost production perspective. So these are, I think, are the two big factors that have impacted the gaming industry the last few years. That has led to a lot of game studios to have not been able to raise successfully and to have been having to lay off a significant number of their workforce. At the same time, from a consumption perspective, consumers are overwhelmed with an oversupply of games that is hard for them to choose and decide, which means that there are development cycles, which tend to be quite big, at least in PC and console, less so in mobile, that go through these woes of having to develop the game, only to then figure out that no one wants to pay for that, no one wants to buy it, no one wants to play it because they're already playing so many other games and they're competing with so many other games. On top of that, you have UGC gaming as well, which of course has become a significant force of to be reckoned with, and one that I think the whole gaming industry still is not looking at too attentively at, with Roblox, and predominantly Roblox, but also Fortnite at the same time, where there's a complete blending of what it means to be a developer and a consumer, right? With the force of a creator, being these UGC creators, creating these experiences on platforms like Roblox. So the ground is very much shifting to what has traditionally been a relatively understood industry, and I think we're entering what I call the adult phase of the gaming industry. I keep saying that the gaming industry is now finally leaving its teenage years, and we're going to see some more complex, some more mature models starting to evolve from there. But a lot of change has to go through, growing pains have to happen first.
It was interesting you mentioning sort of gaming companies needing to figure out what are they actually doing now, and game studios often struggling to raise capital. So one of the companies we're looking at, they've pivoted to be a payments company for gaming specifically, so powering Tencent and Sea, etc. in emerging markets. But previously, their main business with 80% of their revenue was a gaming studio, and that was about five years ago or so. So things are changing a lot. Luana, I'm going to pass this over to you. We're speaking a lot about change. Let's take a step slightly further out from gaming and look at consumer tech as a whole. What's really changed, and what are you guys seeing in the market?
I think a lot of what has changed is this new generation of consumer companies. Everything is more personalized, more co-created. I think when it comes to gaming in particular, what we saw is a lot more opportunities pop up where it's more of like a social, interactive, community-based experience. And I think that applies also to other areas in consumer tech where everything's becoming more collaborative, more consumer-based. I think that a lot of the technologies around consumer tech have been, commoditized to some extent. So, you can build things a lot faster. And so now we're focusing a lot more on like, how do you distribute? And that's any question around like brand, community, taste becomes really important. So I think zooming out, the questions we're asking ourselves is, what is the distribution and go-to-market? Why is that different and special? How are they tapping into the communities that they want to attract? And so, yeah, a big part of that is asking founders, like, how are you thinking about this? Like, what is your brand? Why is it different? Why would people be able to recognize you in a sea of like apps and games and everything? It becomes more and more important to be somewhat in tune with like the cultural zeitgeist of what's going on, and knowing who your end users are and tailoring everything that you're putting out there to them in terms of how you communicate that brand and that value.
And just want to touch on the community element, because we see this a lot. It's like, tech is no longer a moat. Your moat is going to be distribution, or it's going to be data, and ideally you want to own your distribution. And if you can build your own community, well, then you own your distribution. So everyone says, okay, let's build a community, but it's really hard, and it's really hard to keep that community engaged. So what have you seen has worked really well? Because I'm sure you're seeing a lot of companies saying we're community-led and community-driven. We build the community first, and we build it with a product alongside them. What have you seen that has worked really well when it comes to specifically community building?
I think the strongest founders we've backed in the recent, let's say, year or so that have actually built community-led products were part of that community before they built the product. So I think a lot of people are looking, okay, what are we building? Let's build this product. How do we get it to market? Oh, let's build a community. So you end up building a community and a product at the same time, and that's really difficult because I think building a community is so tricky in a world where everyone's distracted and it's really hard to get people to participate. So I think for us, the founders we've backed were either already long-standing part of community. So we've backed one company in the co-creation creative writing space. One of the co-founders had been a voice in like fan fiction writing for a decade. So everyone in these like Reddit communities, Discord communities already knew him. And so he built the product with that community in mind, knowing exactly what they're looking for, what they like. And that's really different because you're not getting to know people as you build. It's like you know the people, you know what they want, and then you're building it. And then you have like instant feedback loops because you're active in the community, you see what's happening. So I think that was a really good example of someone we've backed where it was like, okay, he's a leader in his community already and clearly, has that relationship with the end users. And another one we've backed was actually more in the immigration tech space, so not necessarily like, gaming or entertainment related, but they started out, by building a community first. So bringing together, people that were looking for the kind of like support that they were planning to offer, and then, bringing together like a marketplace of service providers to help them way before the product was even out. So the moment the product came out, they knew what they were building for, they knew what the pain points were, and people recognized them in the space. So yeah, I would say we've taken a very like community first approach when we've looked at these things rather than, people who are building both the product and the community at the same time from scratch.
Makes a lot of sense. Gbite, I'm going to pass this one across to you. There's obviously the B2B side of things, there's the B2C side of things. B2C is sexy and it can scale if it goes well, but it's really hard. So let's talk about the scale side of things. When you're looking at consumer tech as a whole, how do you think about scale? What really excites you? And why would you say no versus why would you say yes?
I think a lot has changed in the last few years. I think Tiago put it really well in that the sector itself we're going through the stage where it needs to mature, meaning that there's a massive difference between eyeballs and something can actually, paying repeatable customers, right? So initially, when we even think of community, community meaning that are they engaged and how engaged are they as a community? Meaning that we're really looking at monetization now, right? That how are they monetizing these communities? Is it, yes, AI, and we're building a lot more, but a lot more of stuff that can be monetized, because that's the bit we're looking at, right? We receive capital to return capital, not just to ensure that we have this really massive community playing games where everybody has utility, but there's not a return that has been made. So we really look at unit economics. We look at repeat usage, people that are paying to use the products. We really go beyond just the community now. What is going on within the community? Is it being monetized? Is there capital being made in the community? And that's arguably, for us now, one of the most important things. We think, obviously, because of where the valuations and the prices went, I think it's fair that there was a level of skepticism which has improved the discipline. I think it has been overdone to a certain degree because the opportunity is massively still there. We see entertainment as one of the best ways for distribution, so really excited about it. But it's more to do with a maturity from the founder's point of view, them really thinking about how we monetize this utility and how we monetize it early. We want to start seeing it a bit early as to how you're thinking about that. And the companies that are able to do that will get capital. It's gone beyond, like I said, community is very important, but it's gone beyond community now, because community could be a group of 1,000 people that are doing something, but nobody's making capital, just the gamers or the people that are getting that utility. So we're backing companies that are thinking about this monetization really, really early. So that's what stands out. That's what stands out for us.
Can I jump in?
And please jump in.
So something very true that you mentioned that I'd like to pick up is the monetization. So one of the key issues that I think gaming has had when the VC world came into it, which is probably, I think, around 8 years, 9 years ago, was that it equated it too much with software development, in the sense that there was a thesis that if you build it, they will come, and if they come, they'll eventually pay, right? And so you could apply a freemium type model to it. Hence the free-to-play, which became very popular on mobile and then went into PC and console with titles like Fortnite and others, relying on the fact that there was a huge community attached to it and that they could then monetize the community. But the difference with something like Consumertech or even other type of B2C technology versus gaming or an entertainment product is that in Consumertech, you're supposedly solving for some sort of pain point, where in entertainment, the pain point is just you want to pass your time and be entertained. And so the substitutionality of that is much easier for you to find somewhere else rather than you finding another way to solve that exact pain point and you being stuck to that particular platform with the very well-known switching costs, right? The switching costs of gaming is effectively just, well, you know how to play that game, so you're good, and so you take more enjoyment out of it, and you have your friends there. The network effect is the only thing that sort of keeps you staying there. And so I find what's happening right now with Fortnite, for example, an example of this, that network effect was very common in Fortnite. It allowed for that monetization to keep happening, but as soon as the network effect starts eroding, you see the monetization not happening. And even though they have a community, they're no longer monetizing it. So a very, very interesting and well put point.
I think you said that really well. And to be fair, the way a number of us are looking at the sector obviously is changing, because there's a massive difference with when someone is doing as you said, trying to solve a pain point, and when someone is doing something for utility, right? So there's a different way in which we've got to look at things and how we judge things. But importantly, I think the fundamental thing for us still stays the same, that it's more than community, and it's more than just these massive group of numbers of people, right? We want to see it being monetized and early.
So really if you see a pitch deck with, we've got 100,000 Discord members, doesn't matter that much.
It's not as powerful as it was a few years ago, right? A few years ago, that was exciting. But right now, well, if you've got 100,000, at least show me what you've done with 10,000 of them, right? Or show me what you've done with 5,000 of them. And that's where we are now.
Ahmet, I'm going to go across to you now. Obviously, we spoke about building communities within a company. Obviously, your country is a massive community, and it seems to be hustling and bustling when it comes to gaming. I previously thought that when my hair falls out, I'll make a trip to Turkey. But when it comes to gaming, if I want to start a gaming startup, it seems like this could be the market to go to. So could you please explain to me what's happening in Turkey? Why is the gaming industry actually blowing up there, and what are you excited about?
Thank you, Ben. Well, as you mentioned, that gaming, mobile gaming, Türkiye is very successful. We had 7 unicorns and 3 of them are gaming. The first unicorn was from gaming. Also, Istanbul is said to be the second largest gaming hub after London. So I asked this question to a venture capital partner a couple of years ago. Why mobile gaming? I mean, what's the reason behind that? And his answer was that it is just a coincidence, because it is because of the peak games. You know, back in 2020, it was acquired by Zynga, US-based gaming company. It was an acquisition for $1.8 billion, and people left peak, established new gaming companies, and it is said to be that at least 60. And one of them is Dream Games. They were also became unicorn after their 2 years after their establishment. So he said that this is just a kind of experience. If you know how to be successful, then you can replicate this in another company. So this was his answer, and it is meaningful for me. But I believe there is another natural factor behind that. As you may already know, Türkiye is a large country in terms of population, 85 million population, and it's number one in Europe. But maybe more important than the population itself is the young population. The median age is 34 years old, which means that half of the population, which is 45 million, almost, below 34 years old. When you compare Turkey with Europe, European average is 44 years old. So Turkey, we can say that Turkey is younger than, 10 years younger than Europe. So this brings two things. The first of all, the talent. Every year we have 1 million university graduates, and 70,000 of them from engineering trades, 30,000 of them from ICT sectors. So this makes that talent cost effective and abundant. This is good. But the second thing is the user base. Since we are young, actually we like to use the mobile applications, and through mobile devices. Nobody prefer to use it on desktop computers. When I was young, we all used that connected internet through that mobile laptops or desktop computers. But now, in terms of accessing internet through mobile devices, Turkey is number one in Europe. So this has some side effects like social media. You know, in Turkey, on average, every person spends 10 hours a week by using social media. In Instagram, we are number 2 in the world. 60 million user base, 50 million for YouTube. So I personally believe this is not something good for any society, and it is not good, definitely not good for Turkish society. I would prefer them to read books or engage in sports activities or arts maybe, but that's the reality. That's the reality, which may not be good for our society. It is definitely good for developers and investors investing in those developers, because whatever you produce in Turkey in technological area, in application, there are tens of millions of people who are ready to try, buy, and eventually test your product. So we have examples of that. Once upon a time that, you know, Getir was successful because they made their product perfect and then replicated outside of Turkey. So that's the situation in Turkey. Of course, there may be some things that we need to consider. We need to be careful. You know, in Turkey, we have rather high inflation rate, and this results in high interest rates. And in such an interest rate, over 30%, it is not easy to convince Turkish LPs invest in either in VCs or in Turkish ventures. So therefore, we see this problem. It is not easy to find Serie A and beyond investments in Turkey. In Turkey's size, it is 1 million plus investments. It's not easy. In terms of seed stage, there's no problem. I mean, government also supported. They have a special program, BIG, which was a grant program, then converted it to its funding program. But it is in the most risky phase. Government is behind those all startups. But starting from Serie A, we see that Turkish startups go to UK, come to UK or the United States because their investors want them to move there, and it is acceptable, but it is not good for us. That's in a nutshell, Turkey's story on gaming, mobile gaming.
No, that's great. I just want to touch on that last point where it's not good for Turkey. I was having a conversation with someone about UK startups who start in the UK, and then as they grow, they go to the US and they re-domicile, they raise more capital there, etc. My question was actually around, is that a bad thing for the UK, or in this case, Turkey? Because if the government's got involved with a startup at the early stage, they sit on the cap table. By them re-domiciling to a jurisdiction where there's more capital, they can continuously raise more capital and grow. So the government, which generally would be a pension fund, so the actual Turkish consumers have access to it, would actually share in the upside. Do you think that that's the case, or how do you think about that in terms of it being positive or negative?
I think it is nothing something we can change. I don't think that it is something bad, because we are living in a global world. I mean, we also want that we are responsible for attracting foreign direct investments. The strategic investments is the core, but now this is financial investments. They can go everywhere, no problem for us, because at the end of the day they will come home. I mean, it's not a big issue, but it eventually affects, it's maybe a tax issue, because when they move to UK, they are paying tax to UK. It's a government issue, but I see personally there is no problem about that, and this happens everywhere. I mean, in order to avoid that, you have to be in the US. So even from UK, they are moving to US sometimes. Even from UK, number one in that early stage investments by far.
Yeah, exactly, and I agree with you. It's especially, yes, you lose out on the taxes, but if the government's actually getting involved early and sits on the cap table, you do still share in the value in the long term. Tiago, I'm going to bring it back to gaming. You mentioned a huge amount of change has happened in this industry. Curious to think about, how do you think about exits and liquidity in the market now? Who's acquiring? Are there still pathways to IPO now that the gaming ecosystem sort of cooled down a little bit? How are you guys thinking about that when it comes to liquidity?
Before I answer that, just to pick up on the re-domiciling. So it's, in my view, not bad as long as the institutional knowledge that that country has developed and somehow retained, right? Because you were talking about how Pelc ended up creating Dream, and maybe the Dream founders or the Dream employees will end up creating something else, and maybe they have already. As long as that is not lost in that re-domiciliation, then I think it's not bad. Of course, there's obviously going to be tax issues, and that is why this is done, but the most important thing is to make sure that that cluster of knowledge is somehow retained and developed and has a connection to the country where that originally was developed. With regards to exits, I think paths to IPO, not just in gaming, it feels obviously a little bit weird right now because everyone's waiting for a few IPOs that shall not be named, and everything is going to be dependent on that. I think exits, though, are very common these days because there is a very frothy M&A market because some of the public companies are trading at relatively low multiples, which makes it a base for private investors, whether that's private equity, family offices, and others, to look at private companies and saying, well, if I apply that same multiple to this company, there's a justification for me to buy it. And some of these multiples, particularly, for example, on the publishing side, are very low. They're trading at something, 1.15x EBITDA, which means that there is a lot of interest from these types of private equity buyers to come in and buy, sometimes even roll up and aggregate what may be, I don't want to call them distressed assets, but the whole industry needs liquidity in some way, shape, or form because of the aforementioned situations. So the M&A market is, I would say, the predominant exit strategy these days. When it comes to content, when it comes to technology, I think that there's probably traditional integration still on M&A. I don't think that there's that much of currently a pathway to IPO. We'll see what happens with Discord, but M&A is, I think, the predominant exit strategy.
And just quickly touching on the last part on M&A, how much time do you guys spend actually creating these pathways to get acquired? Are you spending a lot of time with the corporates or potential acquisition partners, or what role do you see yourselves playing on the cap table when it comes to that? Well,
I think as investors, that's always something that is on the discussion and the horizon from, I don't want to say day one, but certainly. Exactly. I mean, we all want, we're investing so we can get some sort of return. on my side, for example, I do get involved in some M&A on an individual level, and those are types of conversations that I do have with other types of investors, other investors that want to have their exit. But I think it is always coming, I would say, not from the investor on the cap table per se. Sometimes it does, maybe when a situation of a company necessitates that, or the founders are discussing it in the board level, and I've seen some cases, but it's predominantly coming from the acquirers that are looking at the market and saying, okay, we know we have a contact at that VC who sits on the board of that company, why don't we just start probing, for example? That's how I would see those conversations happening, as opposed to it being originated by the VC on a board.
Cool, makes a lot of sense. Luana, I have seen so much happening in the sort of social commerce space, and when it comes to the consumer tech space in general, do you see that being a trend that's going to last for a long time, where people are spending so much time on social media, as we've discussed, and then are then starting to make payments, continuously play games in these sort of apps? Do you see that being a trend that's going to last for a while? And are you excited about that, or how you guys think about sort of the social commerce element?
Yeah, I think that's something that's, in our opinion, going to last just because everything, I think, is converging. So there's, social now spans across entertainment, commerce. I think there's been a consumer behavior shift in which everyone's gone more individualistic, and then everyone's going to come back more to like community, to like, trusting a few couple of people that, that creators, for example, that you feel more strongly aligned with. And I think that has an effect across a lot of different industries. So I think more and more things are starting to converge, and it's not just an app is inherently a social app, or an app is inherently, it's everything starting to come together, and creating spaces and infrastructures where people can do multiple things, like be entertained, like consume. And I think that's going to be a trend that's going to last. And I think, even across gaming, for example, where you're talking about co-creation, and, people kind of creating the games that they want to play, and then spending their like social time on them at the same time. So, you've got creation, consumption, social, all kind of in one. And I think, similarly with commerce as well, you've got, let's say the more like micro creators that are then starting to turn their communities and following into, people who are going to purchase and consume based on what they align with them for. And then equally so, it's going to be people starting to create what they want to consume as well. So I think it's taking it even further to the consumer becoming the creator. So we even see platforms in consumer tech where they allow you to create your own products, whether they're digital or actually even physical products, that you can then share with the rest of your community. Quite close-knit community can be on quite a micro level. So you don't have to be a creator that's got like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of like following, but just if your community is really strong and you create for them, I think all of that has just been so intertwined now. And I don't think it's going to, come apart. I think it's going to become more and more intertwined.
Yeah, and I think it's also a fundamental thing that this new generation, like this is just the way that things are done normally. It's not a new thing where, for all of us, it's a trend, but it's like, no, this is my life. This is how I do things. This is how I make purchases. This is how I spend my time. And Gbite, we've spoken a lot about Africa in the past, and there's a young population. They are very connected when it comes to the digital side of things. I know you spend a lot of time on the continent. What are you excited about when it comes to Africa? You also mentioned young population in Turkey as well, which I think is similar. So, yeah, youngest. We can have a competition later.
No competition. Africa is younger.
So what are you excited about when it comes to Africa, specifically within this space? It's a massive population, young population, very connected. What are you excited about?
Everything. So I spent a lot of time in Istanbul last year, a couple of trips. One of them in particular was to really understand how the young population there are using gaming. What are they doing? Because from our point of view, we think entertainment is going to be one of the best forms of distribution, right? Just as you rightfully said now, they don't see particularly a difference, right? They play their games there, they get information there, soon they'll do their banking there, they will do everything there. It's just one big community where they do everything, right? That they don't see the difference between gaming. And as you said, that's a fundamental difference between, gray hair guys like myself and this new set of individuals as to how they interact, right? So we're really excited about gaming and consumer tech. What's the best way to reach them? They all seem to have mobile phones. What's that behavior like on the mobile phones? And that's where I'm doubling, tripling down on. It's not community for community's sake. I think you mentioned really well when you mentioned those communities where they've got really strong community leaders or guardians in that community that keeps the community engaged. Now, really lovely words for they're doing things that we all are generating capital from. So for Africa, young community, mobile network is growing much faster. So of course it's the distribution. It's the communication with this young population, right? Because a number of these products and services are relatively new. So it's education too that comes in, but education done with entertainment, financial services done with entertainment. It's keeping them engaged. It's being familiar with what they're familiar with. So we're really excited about really engaging and interacting with the young population and doing this with entertainment and gaming. Like I said, we specifically went to go spend some time in Istanbul to see how that population is interacting and what would be too much, right? To what level can we use entertainment to educate and to sell financial services products? Are we able to create games to educate now, right? A number of people are doing it and it's been successful. A number of the big, really established banks too are beginning to do a number of these things. So really excited about how we're going to use gaming and entertainment.
Can I ask you a question? Do you think that much like in Asia, the social commerce apps that are blending entertainment and utility together are going to be predominant in Africa?
Yeah, not only predominant, it's going to be, like I mentioned, it's going to be the norm. They would know nothing else but that. And if you don't show up with that, you're going to come across as strange and weird. So that's the opportunity, and that's the way to go. A number of the Asian apps are already making the crossover. ODBA, which is a financial services company, one of the bigger ones, I think is valued at a 3 or 4 billion valuation. But we can see they're quickly moving away from, not moving away, but not just now being fintech, but going to start using entertainment exactly the way it's been done in Asia to do it here. I'm not too sure if we're going to have all those flashy colors that they, that they love to have there, but definitely it's the model. It's the model, and we are seeing it happening because it's the fastest way in which they interact. And just as you said from the onset, they know nothing else, right? They know nothing else. So it's for the old fogies to adapt to this new trend, which is only going to continue, and for the new innovators to bear that in mind when they're building products and services.
Yeah, it's also this. Such interesting nuances in Africa as well. So here everyone has Apple Pay and it's pretty easy, but in Africa you got mobile money, which is a massive way to process payment. But a lot of these big gaming companies like EA, Activision, etc., they distribute their games in Africa, and African consumers are free players, but they can't monetize them because they have mobile money or cash, etc. So we're seeing very interesting solutions being built in Africa to monetize gamers that are already using the games, but these big gaming companies are not able to actually monetize them.
I'll just jump in, sorry.
Yeah.
An example, I think quite recently there was an IPO in Kenya. I can't remember exactly which one. But Safaricom and someone used this TLDR platform, and it's the largest IPO in the history of the country, right? Because you get a number of the kids that really don't even know what an IPO means or what it stands, what it stands for. But very easily through this app, they've been educated, enlightened in words and terminology that did something really fast, that they were able to take part. And we've seen one of the largest IPOs in Kenya's history as a result of that. So we think it's just going to become more and more of the norm. People are going to get better at doing it, and it's going to bring in a massive part of the population. Like I said, education and awareness is a really huge problem, and this is going to, it took a long time for the guys that were there before them, to learn a number of these things. I think this is going to be done in lightning pace, and it's going to enable a number of people to build on top of that. But I think it's going to become the norm.
You spoke a lot about the ecosystem in Istanbul, and Ahmet, I want to understand, like, for anyone in the audience here who doesn't know about Turkey and the gaming industry in Turkey, why have you been able to develop all these unicorns? What's the secret sauce? I understand, obviously, one leads to another, and you've mentioned that, but can you maybe paint a picture about what does the gaming ecosystem look like in Turkey, and why does it actually work?
Actually, I don't play mobile games, and I am also looking for a meaningful answer for that. But I think this is, well, think about 85 million population, so at the outskirts of Europe. So, you know, we have a European Union accession story, but unfortunately it's stalled. So people, young people, and education is a little bit high, actually. Maybe not as much as European Union average, but almost identical, similar. So everybody needs success. And, you know, we are living in a little bit shaky environment. I mean, geostrategically, geopolitically. I mean, look at our neighboring countries, look at what's happening around Türkiye. And when you look at Turkey, I am 56, so I have witnessed many things in Turkey. So there might be some political issues, military coups, etc., etc. So these kind of things makes you a little bit resilient, and you need to look for the opportunities. So we have to be opportunistic, and I think that young people sees that kind of, that not only gaming, but also in other consumer technology, they are trying to find a way to exit. They want to be successful. So this is one of the main reasons. As you mentioned, that I also mentioned that those demographic things. In Turkey, almost there are many technoparks. Every university has technoparks, and the number of technoparks maybe some hundreds. So government supports this. And if you go and open a gaming studio in one of the technoparks, you pay almost no tax, zero tax. So this is also good for the international gaming companies. For example, as far as I heard, that Dream Games considering to come to London, but probably their R&D center will be stay in Istanbul because it is cost effective, and they know the game and they know the company. And there are other big players, like the biggest ones. They have employees, engineers, thousands of them living in Turkey. So this is also cost effective. Government is aware of that. As an investment promotion agency, of course, our main issue is to promote Turkey's investment environment, support them when they come into Turkey. But we also we have also a policy advocacy role, and we see there is, I mean, this technology environment, this technology sector is a way for Turkey to be successful. I mean, I used to work for strategic projects, for example. Big car manufacturers from Germany, from France, from China, you know, you spend 2 years' time, then they decide to invest, let's say $1 billion, but this $1 billion comes maybe in the next 5 years. When Zynga acquired Peak Games, probably next month they sent the money, $1.8 billion. So it is an amazing thing, and government also sees this, so they support through education programs, to tax incentive programs. I think the reason of that success is combination of all these things. I can say this about that.
Can I add to that? So in the time, because we literally spent 2.5 weeks strictly on that in Turkey. And, you know, it looks as if apart from the government backing it, obviously success begets more success. There's that sort of like belief, like it is the gaming capital of Europe behind London. I've seen it before in some jurisdictions where everybody wants to do fintech, but for some reason, a number of founders are really interested in gaming in Turkey. So that a lot of the investment community has built around that, and I think they've seen it as a moat of some sort. The ecosystem is really, really strong. They're very intentional about gaming there. Very aware, I must say, a really sophisticated ecosystem. But they've spent the time, the energy in developing that. It didn't just happen out of anything. And now that it looks as if they're onto a winning formula, they're just doubling down on it. So there's a lot to learn, and I think you guys should be very proud of what you've put together there. I think it's really impressive.
With that, we are going to have to wrap up here. So if you can please give a round of applause to my fellow panelists. Thank you for listening.